Hello, and welcome to Woodworking for Miniaturists. I'm David Knight, and this is episode 8. And in this episode, I'm going to present you with a set of tools that I regard as basic and essential. Let's talk about your basic tool set. In future episodes, I'm going to describe many tools in detail. Today, I'm going to briefly go through a short list of basic, indispensable tools. You can start with just a few tools, but get the best quality that you can find. Money spent on cheap tools or untried great ideas is money thrown away. Tools can be added to your collection of basics if you learn that they do a better job than what you already have, that they get better results, are easier to use, or allow you to branch out into new techniques. So here's my minimum list of essentials, based on what I actually used putting together a small project which we're going to do together in the future. This is a spice cupboard, and the tools that I needed to use to put this together are the ones that we're going to go through first. And then I'll add a few which are just probably good ideas to have. First of all, you need a good solid flat surface, and you need good lighting. What you see here is a fabric cutting pad. It's used for fabric cutting with a cutting wheel. That's what it was intended for, but it also works real well with a knife. It is said to be self-healing, which means that you can run a sharp blade over it and it won't get torn up. So it lasts quite a while. The next thing that you're going to need is a supply of wood. This is a small piece of 1/16 inch basswood. This comes from Midwest Products. This came in a piece that was 3 inches wide and 24 inches long. This is just a piece of scrap that remains from that larger sheet. I keep my scraps in separate bags depending on the thickness, and I was able to make that spice cupboard without cutting into a large sheet at all, just out of scraps from this bag. You will need an X-Acto knife or some other kind of craft knife. This is perhaps your most important tool. The example you see here is a Fisker's handle, which is available in sewing stores. It's easier on your hands than the round metal X-Acto handle. On this knife, I have a number 11 X-Acto blade. While I'm not using an X-Acto handle, I have found that X-Acto seems to make the very best blades. They are less inclined to get rusty, and they hold an edge quite well, and they're less likely to snap off at the tip than other blades I've used. Whatever blade you use, you will need to get a supply of them. The idea with an X-Acto knife or a craft knife is that when this blade gets dull, you simply replace it. You don't try to sharpen it. This particular blade is an X-Acto number 11, and I find that to be quite useful. Perhaps the next most important tool is a ruler. Rulers have two purposes: to measure distances and to use as a straight edge for drawing or cutting straight lines. I believe that these quilting rulers are the best straight edges, and I keep two sizes handy. This one is 1.5 inches wide and 6 inches long. I use it more than any other ruler. It is transparent, which is helpful in a number of ways. It is a full 1/8 of an inch thick, which is probably what makes it the best kind of straight edge. And it is marked out in 1/8 inch increments. It also has grippy areas on the underside, which keeps it from moving during a cut or a mark. For longer cuts, I have another quilter's ruler. This one is 3 inches wide and 18 inches long. I use this when I'm cutting many strips of wood for clapboards or for flooring. It doesn't have the grippy sections on the back, but you can get these rubber rings that stick on here, and they work pretty well for holding the ruler still. I think that I could probably use a few more than what I have on here. You will also need a very different kind of ruler. This is for making precise measurements. This metal ruler is a type that you can get in any hardware store or even an auto parts store. This particular one is marked out in millimeters on one side and in inches on the other. And the inches in this case are divided into 64ths. So that's a very fine, very precise ruler potentially. As I said, these are widely available. This is an architect's scale, and it also has very fine increments, which is useful. But this scale is printed, or this particular part of the scale is printed, so that you are actually measuring things in a 1 to 12 scale. So these increments represent inches, half inches, and quarter inches, and that's about as fine as you would ever need to go. So this measures actual distances, and this measures scale distances, and we'll talk about that in more detail in future episodes. The next absolutely essential tool is a square, and the square that I recommend is a thin-based machinist square. Here are 2 machinist squares. This one is smaller, and it has a very thick base. This thick base is very useful for gluing procedures, and we'll talk about exactly how that works in a future session. But it has a problem when it comes to working with thin wood. Because of its thickness, when you try to use it on wood like this, which is a 1/16 of an inch thick, the blade is actually up above the wood, which makes some room for imprecision. So working with thin wood, it really is much better to have a thinner base square that sits down tight on the wood, and now your knife mark is going to be very precisely along the edge of that square. Next essential tool is what is called a razor saw. X-Acto makes these. They're not the only ones who make these. These have extremely fine teeth, and so they will do a fine job of cutting an edge. The miter box has a lip on the bottom, which allows you to push it up against the edge of your work table, and that holds it in place very solidly. And you hold a piece of wood that you want to cut against one side of the miter box, and then it is immobilized, which is what you need. There are grooves here to hold the saw. The one that I'm showing you right now will make a cut at a 90-degree angle. There are also grooves for 60 degrees, 45. I have the saw in one of the 45 grooves right now. There's another one that goes in the opposite direction over here. These little black pegs are for holding the piece of wood solidly in place. This particular miter box comes from Midwest Products. Those are the absolutely essential tools. Other things are very useful, but I wouldn't call them essential. This is a set of what are called needle files. Each one of them is a different shape in cross-section. This one's triangular, this one's round. This one's flat on one side and curved on the other. These are very good for cleaning up edges, especially edges that have a curved line to them, as opposed to straight edges like this. You will need to have some sandpaper. I recommend sandpaper at around 240 or 220 as your coarser sandpaper. This sandpaper actually shapes wood. One of the ways that I used this sandpaper making this piece was to sand the back of it like that, which brought all of the pieces that are part of the back onto the same plane, flattened them out, did the same thing on the bottom. You will use smaller pieces of sandpaper for detailed work, and this is the other grit that I recommend, which is 400 grit. When you've sanded a piece of wood with 400 grit, there is no purpose in making that surface any smoother than that. Finish can go directly on to a surface that was sanded with 400 grit. Of course, you will need some glue. The glue that I use most often is Aleene's tacky glue. This works well for any kind of porous material. And I have this applicator, which I find to be very handy. When you hold this in your hand in this way, it gives you a lot of power to push the glue out. This is an ideal sized nozzle for this applicator. This will leave a very small bead of glue, or most of the nozzles that come with applicators like this are far too fine to be able to force a thick glue through. You will need clamps and clips. Many companies make small clamps like this. This one is made by DeWalt. I found it to work quite well. Some clamps will slip if you try to apply a great amount of pressure. They just will not clamp down any tighter. This is for assembling the carcass of a piece such as this. Holds it together until the glue dries. The release is here. I said you also will need some clips. These are what are called paper clamps, and they're available in office supply stores. There are a number of sizes. This does not have the ability to do its clamping over a wider width. So that's what these larger clamps are for. You may be surprised to learn that one of the best kinds of clamps is masking tape. It's a good idea to keep a supply of this on hand, and when putting two pieces of wood together, like this one and this one, you can help hold that in place by getting the masking tape tight over that joint, and of course leaving it alone till the glue dries. If you choose to paint the piece that you've made, of course you're going to need some paint. I use acrylic water-based paints, and you'll need some good artist paint brushes. These come in a number of different shapes and sizes. If you're going to stain the piece that you make, you probably will want to use an oil-based stain. And when I use something like an oil-based stain, I use a disposable brush, so I don't bother trying to clean brushes that I've used oil-based stains with. Depending on how good your eyesight is, one of my essential tools is a pair of reading glasses. So that's everything that I used in making this piece of small furniture so far. I intend to put knobs on these two drawers, and in order to do that I'm going to need to drill small holes there. So that brings us to our next tool. This is a hand tool specifically for drilling. The clamp is here, and it actually has two sizes. So for very fine drills, this is the clamp that you would use, and you can turn it around and the clamp on the other end is somewhat larger. This is a very nice design. because you can use it with one hand. You hold your finger on the top, there's an indentation there for that. The top is able to spin, and so you can put your drill to the point where you want to make a tool and turn the drill while applying pressure with your finger from the top. You will need some small drills. These are very, very small drills. I think I might have to go into one of my other drill boxes in order to make a hole for those knobs on those drawers. But you will need to obtain some drills of some kind. A hammer can be a useful tool. I like this one because it has interchangeable ends. Right now it's wearing its brass end and its plastic end. Brass is excellent for hammering on harder metals like steel, because the brass is softer, it's less likely to mar the steel. And the same thing is basically true for wood by using this plastic tip. The hammer has a couple of other steel ends. There are a variety of kinds of pliers that you will find useful. Here we have a set of needle nose pliers and a set of wire cutters. There are also pliers that have rounded jaws, and those are for bending nice smooth curves in wire. You will find use for tweezers, and once again, there are a variety of kinds of tweezers. This pair is probably my favorite. One of the things I like about it is that it has grippers in the jaws. The jaws are bent at an angle which puts the work out where you can see it better, yet you're not working in the shadow or behind your hand. And this pair of tweezers also has a lock, so you can clamp onto something and it will stay clamped onto something without constant pressure on it. You will need good scissors. These scissors came from a quilting store, and they're high quality scissors for cutting fabric, card, paper. Sometimes you need to cut something that's more substantial. In that case, you'll want a pair of shears with more leverage for your hand. The tools that I've been showing you come from Micromark, Miniatures.com, Model Craft Tools. The lumber comes from Northeastern Miniature Lumber. You can also get lumber from Miniatures.com and from Midwest Products. Many of these tools and a lot of the materials that you can use for your miniatures come from quilting and sewing suppliers, also hobby stores, hardware stores, and do-it-yourself stores. As I mentioned before, I'm going to describe these tools and many others in more detail in subsequent episodes. In the meantime, as the bikers say, keep the shiny side up.